Hi, I'm Amy Schellekens, and I'm one of the attorneys with Sterk Family Law. I'm here today with Mary Beth Walter, and we're going to talk about navigating the uncharted territory of the 2020-2021 school year. Hi, Mary Beth. How are you?
I'm well, Amy, and how are you?
Good. It's very unprecedented times, but I think you have some tips for parents and families going through this unprecedented time. Is that right?
Yes, I do. We will all come out, I'm firmly convinced, stronger because we're going to, by necessity, go forward. But sometimes I think it's the bridging and the getting there. So Amy and I and and Kelly at Sterk Family Law did talk a little bit about this. So we had brainstormed and I had gone back and looked at stuff that, it holds true for advocacy, and this is just another delivery system for your child's schooling or student schooling. The first thing is reread the IEP. Know exactly what what the basis is for anything. And what do you as a parent think is important? What do you as that child's advocate think needs to be in a priority order? Some of it is more difficult to accomplish than others, but that doesn't mean that you want to let the school district say, oh, that's too difficult. You need to keep them to their promise that your child has a fair, appropriate public education. So with priorities, how are they going to be addressed? I would ask, reread your IP, say, what is the priority? Get a schedule. I mean, it sounds elementary, but find out, especially if the student has an IEP or even a 504, how is that day going to be scheduled? Don't, they'll tell you, well, you sign on at 8:30, 9:30, whatever. No, say, I want to know how you plan to outline this and implement the structure. Because I think, especially in the case of children with some needs that aren't readily addressed in schools, you need to know what the structure is. That's, what I think. Find out who the case manager and the teacher are. They're not always the same person. And once you find that out, when are they available to address your concerns? Sometimes I always feel that email or texting or whatever, it can be a blessing and a curse. And sometimes you need to talk to that teacher or case manager over the phone. It's not possible, I know right now, for in-person, but at the same time, nuances get lost, or perhaps they'll give you the answer and it wasn't the intent of your concern. So I also think, in addition to the email, say, what times can I call, or do I email and say I need to call you about this? You have that right. And also, as an advocate, I think you use all avenues. And I think talking as well as the emailer or other communication is just as valid. I don't know, Amy, what do you think?
I agree. I mean, I think one of the things that I'm hearing from a lot of parents is that they have these concerns, but they don't exactly know how to address it with the school. And a lot of parents are getting these answers from school of the schools don't know yet either. The schools don't know what's going to happen or how the e-learning is going to be implemented or how they're going to service IEP students or 504s. But I think the school is acknowledging that those are unique circumstances. So I think having parents empower themselves that the answers may not be right now, but making sure that you're following up and getting those answers as the school figures out what it's gonna look like is really important for parents.
And I think too, the law says, the school law states that a parent is an equal partner. Well, as that equal partner, this would be, it might be the opportunity to shape it in a different way than what the student, the parent, the teacher is used to. But that doesn't mean it can't be tried. And I think that never apologize for wanting to try it a certain way. I mean, if it can't be done, it can't be done, but you won't know until you ask. That's
our school district, for example, recently said that some of our IEP students might actually go in person for some services, but they don't really know what that's going to look like, or whether we're going to do busing or what times, and the schedule. So I think that communication with the school is really key for parents right now, to know I can follow up and I can reach out to the team and kind of help them along with what we're going to do for my child.
And I also think when you're having those conversations and they say, and they're truthful, I don't know, then I would ask them, so when can I follow up with you so you have a direction with which to go? I always think that if you leave it with an end date where you're either going to remake communication or get an answer to your question, rather than leave it open-ended, because it gives the school, the parent, the student, the guardian a time frame. And I think that's very important. We put time frames in IEPs all the time. And so
Right.
I would use that power. And, you know, Amy, you made a good point about therapeutic services. So can those be delivered electronically? You know, some maybe can, or it's not a perfect solution, but can it be tried until the in-person comes up? If they say, oh, we're not set up for in-person with speech and language, well, can a Zoom be tried? Because, you know, you can see, especially without the barrier of the mask, the formation in the mouth for the syllables and everything else. And if they say, no, you can't, then I would ask them, why not? Or how can we accomplish this?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I know our school district was making a big priority, is how we were going to make those therapeutic services work for families. It's causing a lot of frustration, I think, with families too. We're looking a couple weeks out from school and we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But I think one of the other concerns for families is, how are we addressing issues if we are e-learning with technology? Just like you had pointed out, we can do some Zooms for speech therapy, but if we're wearing masks, it is very hard to see what's happening in terms of forming those, you know, how we're going to form our mouth and the tongue to make those sounds that we're struggling with.
And I think a support service that gets overlooked sometimes is the social work or the counseling done by a psychologist. And I think that it's important. Also, IEPs give minutes. They give minutes or times per week. So if they're saying, we don't know yet, and the team has determined that this person, especially with mental health or speech, twice a week, well then, does that mean starting in January, it's 4 times a week? Because, you know, I think unless it's attempted, and it might not work out, but unless it's attempted, I think that the student and their family have a right expectation and to say, okay, you thought it was very important, I have this 8 times a month, or what, it's 8 times whatever, 12 school years or 10 or whatever, 80. How is this going to be accomplished?
Right.
Because simply to say I don't know, that's fine, but it's, you know, like anything else, we want to see some kind of observable ways to go forward with it.
Sure. And I think one of my concerns as a parent too is some of those services, especially, for example, occupational therapy, does cross over for many students into their actual classes. You know, maybe it's your skills on holding a pen or holding a pencil that are going to cross over into your actual classes too. But those therapeutic services are going to need to be serviced now to make sure that we are able to make progress in those classes.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, one thing I don't think any school district that I've encountered really feels they have 100% handle on the logistics of implementing the technology. I think in the metro area, we're very lucky. You know, we have the bandwidth, we have this. But there's also, we were talking a little bit about one of my granddaughters had Chicago Public and I was with her. what happens when the Chromebook goes down? That's another question I think parents can ask. Just the mechanics, you know, and you know what? Not only is what the textbook is, but if you've done whatever's been instructed on the screen, on the phone, and you need to talk to a real life person, when are they available, and how do you access them? You know, and if it gets you know, if there's a major malfunction, what is the mechanism for you to take it in and receive a substitute one? Because every day you're without one is another opportunity lost, especially since parents and other family members have to structure that with the remote learning.
Well, that's one of the things actually I think a lot of families are expressing concern about too, is as we're moving into phase 4 in Illinois, there are companies that are starting to open up, and there are parents who then actually have to go to work in a physical office, and yet now they're also going to be, for many schools, expected to help facilitate some e-learning, especially for younger children. So older kids can maybe do some of it on their own, but for younger kids, those parents might have to actually facilitate some, helping them log in or helping them, you know, talk to the teacher and advocate for themselves. I think it's causing a lot of stress for families.
Well, and I think too, it's something that we hadn't talked about when we were preparing the outline, but can there be a trial run? You know, is it always that it's the first day of school and instructional times starts, or can there be a trial run, because we are very dependent upon technology and a lot of different factors to make sure that the learning is implemented?
I agree, and I think, you know, schools are still learning the structures. So one of the things I want to talk about a little bit before we wrap up on this session is how do we deal with instructional time versus time that the student is supposed to be, you know, working independently, and how, especially for our IEP or 504 kids, how is that independent time going to work for them?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mary Beth.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's an excellent point. And an excellent point is, I think as well, is what do you do if the parent is overwhelmed, and how much, you know, some children love to learn. They love this setting. Some children are resistive. So, you know, how can it be so that families aren't always in an adversarial position with one another, because the adult saying to the student, yeah, you got to do this, and the student's going, not doing it. You know, how do we facilitate that as well? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the latest that I had read for educators was that the recommendation is that they not actually directly instruct for longer than 20 to 30 minutes on a Zoom type classroom, and then have the student do independent work, which means that student might be on and off the device on the Zoom with the teacher, and making sure that they're able to do that independent work when it's the off time from the actual teacher being there.
And how much is expected of any student for the off time work completion? You know, if you know that your child has a frustration level, especially elementary school, because it's a much lower threshold. If you're spending 2 hours a night after you are trying to get home to help your child, is it realistic? And that is one of the things I think should be discussed with the team. You know,
I agree. I think today we've talked about a lot of questions and concerns about students that have IEPs or 504 plans, but certainly we're also going to talk about some tips for e-learning with students in another session. So if you have any questions, certainly give us a call at Sterk Family Law. The number is 815-600-8950. Thanks so much, Mary Beth.
Thank you, Amy.